What's up and welcome back. It's time for the 30th anniversary of Blank Check. I know. You didn't know it was time, but it is. It is time for the 30th anniversary of. If you clicked on this, kudos to you. I love you. But this is Blank Check. It's a Disney movie. It came out in 1994 and it has audio description on Disney Plus, done by Prime Focus Technologies. What is that? I've watched hundreds of things, various films and television series. I've never heard of Prime Focus Technologies. Is what is this? What is this company? What is life? I don't know anymore. It's narrated by somebody, Alex O'Neill. Um, I have some thoughts. Anyway, so Blank Check. Uh, it's nostalgic for me, but we need to talk about that because if you've subscribed to me for a while, first of all, I want to say because I'm a blind film critic to my blind fans, I have a purple hat on backwards, black sunglasses, and I'm wearing a Loki shirt, which is it's a Disney Plus property, so it's not too far away. Um, if you watched me for a while, you know that I did my 40 for 40 last year when I turned 40, and I had a lot of my favorite films, and a lot of them got like A pluses because I'm very nostalgic. I acknowledge up front that I'm like, I don't know if this is an actual grade for the film, but I love the film and I've kind of lost objectivity with it. I've kind of lost the ability to figure out what I think I could guess grades and just be like, well, but it feels like I'm being shaped by the way that other critics look at films. Like if I were to review Deep Blue Sea, I'd be like, I give it an A plus, but I feel like I have to give it like I don't know, like a C because I'm a critic and critics are not supposed to like films like this. And it's like, man, I thought that film was fun. I've seen that film a ton of times. It's stupid, it's fun, but and I acknowledge that. I fully own that. So Blank Check for me, and I knew this going into this because I actually watched Blank Check not too long ago. In the scheme of things, when you think about like this being a film from my childhood, but I saw this film 7, 8 years ago, probably, and I watched this film a lot as a kid, and then I was like, oh my god, Blank Check, and this was one of those films where I grew up, and it didn't work on me anymore, and that's rare for me. Uh, it's like I can understand, and if I had a kid, I would totally be like, why don't we watch Blank Check together? But the nostalgia was gone for me. And this was a film I totally remember watching and loving as a kid because it's like, who doesn't just want $1 million as a kid to just do whatever you want? Like, with, and when you're a little kid, I think they say he's 7 in this because there's a point where his dad, who is played by, oh man, he's a great character actor too. And I forgot his name, James. He's in Independence Day also. Uh, anyway, he says, "Have you seen a 7-year-old boy?" So he actually ages his son specifically in the film. We'll get to that. And at like that age, I remember sort of like living, on a street and having friends. And there was this point where there was a house that was for sale on the block, and we used to sit outside of it and be like, "Man, what if we bought this house?" We're all like under the age of 10. When you play on the street, you're not all the same age. You're just the age of whatever you are on the street. So age is like 6 to 9, probably. We're all like around the same age. And we're all like, oh man, we could play in that house. That'd be great. We'd have our own house. So we could just have fun. Just use that as a playhouse. And like, you're not thinking about like the logistics of it, of like, how do we buy this house? Realistically, we don't have the money. Our parents can't. What are they going to do? Come together and buy us a house so that we can just hang out in? I mean, that would be like the ultimate in. That's when your families are too rich, is when they're like, oh, wouldn't it be great if we just had another house on the block where our kids could just go? Oh, let's buy a neighbor's house and let's just send them there. Like um, yeah, that's when that's when your parents are too rich. Uh, but no, yeah, it's like the ultimate clubhouse. It's like it's more than a treehouse. It's more than a fort. It's like that house has doors and a bathroom. So, um, you really, so I totally like sympathized with this kid in Blank Check because I was like, yes. And the house he buys is super dope. It's like a castle. It's like this house on the street where you're like, where do they live that this house exists? Because you feel like it would violate like any HOA codes, and you're like, where does this house exist? In America? Where are they? Where did they shoot this? Can I buy this house? Can somebody own this house? Because like right down the road, supposedly is the kid's house. Like he doesn't live that far. Because every time he, like when he's like moving stuff into the house later on in the film, like the moving trucks and everything are jamming up the street for his dad. And his dad can't get through, and he's like, what's going on here?" And he's like, "Oh, Mr. McIntosh." Um, so it's like you're just living on like a normal residential street, and like at the end of it is this like tiny castle. It's very weird. Uh, so yeah, um, it's a cool house. Like when he goes inside of it, like it's cool on the interior. There's a pool. He puts a water slide into it. It's yeah. I mean, it's a dope house. I have no idea what this would have cost. Even the 1994 prices, it feels like I think that's his million right there. You know, like I feel like if he doesn't use the full million, he only has like a little bit of money left after that. So I don't think there's no way that house was like 200,000. You know, like there's I can't remember what he pays for in this movie, but it always feels like that's not enough. You know, that it is this can be. Um and maybe that's the adult in me, because as a kid I would have been like, oh yeah, this totally feels legit. But man, this is how adults do things. It's easy. I can totally adult. Um as an adult, you're like, this is insane. This movie makes no sense. Uh and the I that was the problem, is like when I grew up and I was looking back on this film, I'm looking at this and I go, I can't watch this anymore because it's got too many things as an adult where you're like, this is impossible. What is happening here? Where are the adults? What is happening? And basically, if you've never seen Blank Check before, it's about this kid Preston who, I don't know, he feels like he's being overlooked at home with his family, and one day he's on his way to something I can't remember, and he gets into this run-in with this bad guy who needs to get out of there quickly. You know what I'm saying? So the kid's bike is messed up, and he just hands him a check, and it's a blank check. He doesn't, write in the amount of money. So he just signs it. And he didn't put the amount of money in it to pay for the kid's bike because he's too worried about evading crime, and gives it to the kid. And the kid's like, what if I took this to the bank and put $1 million? So he goes back to his computer and has his computer print on the check, $1 million paid to, and he has to come up with the name of like an adult. So he comes up with this like Mr. McIntosh, and everybody's just like, yeah, it makes sense. This kid would be cashing a check from Mr. McIntosh, whatever. So anyway, um, the bank manager luckily is in with the dirty guy, and he thinks that this is a weird. It's a very sort of like happenstance thing, where if there wasn't this crime happening, I don't know that this kid would have gotten $1 million, but the bank manager is dirty and he is washing money, and he thinks that this is the $1 million that he's supposed to give. The kid gets the exact amount of money needed for this. This is why you can't watch Playing Check as an adult, because it's the exact same amount of money. And so he hands it to him. It's like you couldn't have just come up with a more fun way for this kid to get $1 million. Like he has to go through this really convoluted way that makes absolutely no sense. And then, of course, later on, the gangsters are like, "You did what? No, this is my bag, man. You gave $1 million to a kid?" And it's like, "I thought you were. He said he knew you, and blah blah blah." And it's like, oh my god, Disney, what were you doing? Who was on crack during this film? Like, how much cocaine was on the table for this? Um, and working at this bank already is like this FBI agent, who's this pretty, attractive young FBI agent, female FBI agent, who starts investigating on this Mr. McIntosh to see, because there's some suspected stuff, but she just keeps running into Preston, and Preston also has a driver, Henry, who is in this film quite a bit, who is kind of like one of those guys you saw a lot in the 90s and then just never saw again. I recognize him and I'm like, what happened to that guy? Where did he go? Like what I felt like he like had a moment where he was acting and then he just kind of stopped acting, or people stopped giving him gigs, and I don't know at what point that was. But some of these character actors from certain periods, like, love to do a deep dive, like where did you go? Um, but sort of like the guy that you offer a role to when John Candy says no, that guy. Um, and no, I didn't look up any of these names because after all these years, I just didn't care. I don't know why I did a 30th anniversary for Blank Check. I just wanted to talk about how Blank Check, because I think because I do so many nostalgic reviews that people think that, oh, if I've seen a movie at a certain period of my life, I'm incapable. No, that's the point of Blank Check, is that I actually, you know, look at it now and I go, oh yeah, this movie doesn't work. And it makes me think, as a kid, I'm like, man, you like this? But yet I can watch The Mighty Ducks like 20 times over and over. And I love that movie and its sequels. But this doesn't work for me anymore as an adult. It just gets too weird and convoluted, and uh, there are things in this. Even I was noticing towards the end when Preston and the FBI. Preston goes on a date with the FBI agent, which is like, he's 7, she's a grown ass adult. Of course, he thinks it's like more of an. And I was like, at 7, I wasn't thinking those things, man. Like I feel like that's a stretch. I don't know that 7-year-old boys are thinking about that kind of stuff. I think that's it's a weird age. Like, age him up if you're going to do that. Make him 13 or something like that, because I just don't know. Um, Maybe it was just a weird line that his dad had. Maybe he's not really 7. I don't know, but I do remember that line. He's like, "Do you see? Has anybody seen a 7-year-old boy walking around here?" And I was like, "Is he 7? He feels way older than that." Um, so yeah, I don't know, of an indeterminate age, which is actually kind of important, because there's a thing later on that they do, where he's like, "Oh, so you didn't really, well, I it started out that way, but I do like you now," like that kind of thing. Like, she's having that conversation with her, and he's like, "Oh, can I call you sometime?" Meanwhile, remember, grown ass adult, little boy, and she's like, "Why don't you wait? Why don't you call me in 10 years?" And then he's like, 8, and then or it's like 6 or whatever. Anyway, it becomes like 8 years or 6 years or something like that. I did the math, and I was like, so he would still be underage. Like, even her first offer, he'd be like 17 if he was 7. Although he is about to have a birthday, so maybe he turns, or he's having a birthday. It's like a big thing, so maybe he turns 8. So then he'd be 18. So that 10 was like perfectly written, but the fact that she negotiates the way down makes it so that it, like, that number can't be used anymore. Like, this is like, okay, so inappropriate again. We're back down to eh, the what are we doing here category. Um it's a weird film, and I absolutely did watch it, and I remember like 7 or 8 years ago when I saw it for the first time in a while, thinking to myself, oh no. And it kind of looked cheap too, and that was back when because it was back when I could see. So I'm trying to go far enough back that it was like shortly before I started losing my vision, but not too much before that. And I was like, this doesn't even really look that well shot compared to the rest of the Disney movies. This looks like a C level Disney movie that got a theatrical release. I don't. The kid didn't really go on to do anything. The blank check kid didn't really go on to do anything. Uh, I don't know how many people remember this movie. I kind of remember the poster, and it was kind of like that kid was on the front, and he had like his sunglasses down, like he was like super cool. And I was like blank check, and yeah, I mean, I'm appreciative of the time that I had with it. I'm appreciative of that moment in time that I got to have with blank check because hit me at that right time. And like I said, when you're 11 and you're like, oh my god, there's a movie about an 11-year-old who gets $1 million. But I just feel like that movie could be made differently and have, just if you're gonna have fun with it, it's a dumb premise anyway. Like, don't go through this convoluted plot with the mob, with this mob guy and this timing of this bank manager who happens to need to give $1 million right at that specific moment in time. And then this weird relationship with this FBI agent. Like, why is he trying to date an FBI agent? I know he doesn't know she's FBI at the time, but it's like, why? I know she's hot, but like, aren't you 7? Like, he's playing with toys and stuff still. So, um, audio description, audio description on this was it felt so basic. It felt like this was somebody's idea of what audio description was, and then they tried to do it. Is it bad? No, because it tracks the characters pretty well. I got a pretty decent description of things, and I've seen this film before. But like, I loved when they were doing the opening credits and they do movie title, blank check. I was like, what? I don't think I've ever heard that before. Where they use the word movie title to indicate the fact that like, this is the title of the movie. In case you didn't know what movie you had rented, purchased, bought, was airing on television. You know what I'm saying? Like, in case you've completely lost your mind, they're here to remind you the name of the movie is Blank Check. In case you're watching the opening credits and you think it's weird that somebody just says the words blank check without letting you know that is the title of the film. I was like, this is such a weird choice. Um, so I don't know where I don't know if this company is still making audio description, if they gave up. Maybe they had a short-term deal with Disney and they made like one track and it was blank check and Disney was like, I don't know, man. I mean, we'll take the track because we don't want to pay for another one for this movie because it's from 1994 and we don't know how many people are going to watch it, but we're just not going to re-up you on this. Or maybe they're on like more obscure movies from like the 80s and 90s. I don't know. Maybe they're on like the Computer Wore Tennis Shoes and I just haven't watched it yet. I don't know. But this was, it was weird. His voice is fine. It's very sort of like, I would say not for kids movie, but he could narrate other things. But there's nothing engaging here that says kids movie to me. There's something about this that screams this narration is meant for kids. Um, and I think that's the thing is that at the end of the day, it's mostly kids that are going to be watching these films or nostalgic people like me. But I don't mind it when I know I'm watching a film that's meant for kids and it has what I would call engaging, imaginative audio description narration for kids, where it sounds like when you read your kid a bedtime story. You know what I'm saying? Like, you do something differently than when you read a book to yourself or when you read a presentation to your boss. When you go home that night and you read to your kid, generally you end up doing a little something with the story. There's a little something to put into that story. You don't just go, and the three little pigs walked down the street and saw that their houses were there. So then they walked to them. They walked in their doors and inside the houses and found that they were home. And it's just kind of like, I mean, like, you could do that, but like, I guess if you're trying to, I guess when you're trying to put your kid to sleep, you just drone. But I feel like most parents don't do that. And those are the kids who get like really into reading, are the kids who think like, oh, when she's reading to me, it's really fun. I can't wait to read this myself. Um, so I, I'm gonna, I, there might be a little bit of nostalgia in this grade. And I'm acknowledging the fact that I think this is meant for kids, and I think kids will like this. I know because I was a kid and I did like this. So if a critic tried, if Roger Ebert had come up to me on the street when I was 11, I guess, whatever. When was I 10? I was 10. I hadn't turned 11. I think this one came out in early 1994. So if he came up to me when I was 10 and was like, "This movie's garbage," I'd have been like, "You're stupid. I hate your stupid face." I love this movie. So I don't want to be that guy. Um, and so I won't be that for kids. It's not getting an A plus. I'm gonna give Blank Check a B minus. It's got problems, but I do think it still entertains kids. But I think adults, like, I feel bad for for making my mom probably went through this with me. I feel bad because now that I watch it as an adult, I'm like, there are better movies for kids than this. This one just doesn't make any sense. This just has a bad script. But I'm sure kids will love it because inherently it's just like, what happens if you had $1 million? What would you do? The answer is buy a castle that happens to be right down the end of the street. Anyway, 30 years. Thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing, and I'll see you guys on the other side.